Welcome to The Future is Old. My name is Peter Kaldis, and I am the host of this brand new podcast. I am the CEO of Next 50 Foundation. We're a private foundation based in Denver, Colorado that works to create a world that values aging. Before that, I ran the American Society on Aging, also SOFIA, a community-based organization in South Florida. So you could say I know a little bit about aging, and most importantly, I'm turning 50 this year.
That's exciting.
And I'm joined by my co-host.
Hi, I am Rach Angard, and I am a comedian. That's really it. I do other stuff. I work at Next 50 too, but mostly the office jokester.
So you're going to be like the co-host, the person that makes sure I'm on time, the person that makes sure the guests are on time.
Yeah, that's right.
All the things.
That's right, exactly. I'm going to help you with that. I'll put in some jokes every once in a while. You know, comedians are really good at timing, so I will make sure that everything's running smoothly.
That's great. Well, okay, so let's talk a little bit about this podcast.
Yes.
The Future is Old.
Yes.
Why are we doing this podcast? Why is a private foundation doing this podcast? Well, it's because it's the one thing that we're all doing, which is getting old.
Mm-hmm.
And so many of us struggle with that word alone.
Yeah.
There's all sorts of connotations that we've associated with aging.
Mm-hmm.
And we avoid it. We're a little embarrassed by it. And so what this podcast is meant to do is to challenge those stereotypes.
Yes.
Really get to why it is that we hate getting wrinkles.
Yeah, right. Why we're so scared to age, and what are we scared of?
Right.
And challenging that notion.
And so what this podcast is going to be, it's going to be about meeting with the leaders, the thinkers, the creatives across Hollywood, marketing, media, but also sports figures.
Right.
We have some scientists, we have authors, we have some
entrepreneurs, people in beauty and fashion. We're going to be all across the board.
And so
because ageism is everywhere.
Ageism is everywhere.
Yes.
And we have to do our little part to try and just raise awareness. I don't think there's enough of that.
No, you're telling me I'm the only person that's ever bringing it up. Some would say too much.
But it's important that we do it because I think we should stop hurting ourselves and stop sort of insulting our future selves.
Yeah, I think that's a really beautiful way of putting it. Stop insulting our future selves.
Yeah, well, I can't pretend to have coined that.
Oh.
But others have.
It's beautiful.
But it's truth. It's truth. I also want to make sure that people understand what this podcast isn't. This podcast is not about really important instructions on how to take your blood pressure.
Right.
Right. This podcast is not going to give you the latest and greatest biohacking solution.
Yeah, we're not really concerned about longevity.
No, we're concerned about culture.
Mm-hmm.
We're concerned about how age is perceived in culture because we're not talking about it enough. And so we are on this podcast. So welcome to The Future is Old. So our next guest actually
perfect for this.
has been speaking out against ageism. And I just want to give you some examples of things that people have asked her about.
Okay.
She runs a fantastic website called Yo, Is This Ageist?
Okay.
It's a great name. And so people have been writing in and sending examples of where ageism comes up in day-to-day living.
Yeah.
I'll ask you, is this ageist? You want to go to a dog shelter and adopt a dog, but you're 80 years old and the dog shelter says you're too old for that.
I'm going to say yes.
Yeah, I think it's a little ageist,
It's a little ageist
to prevent people from adopting a Chihuahua.
Yeah, exactly. And there's so many dogs that need homes.
Right.
Yes.
Right. Or how about when you apply for a job and instead of asking for your age, they ask for your generational label.
What? It's like the same thing.
Well, what if they were asking straight on for your race to make a determination around
your
aging?
religion?
So these are the kinds of things that happen day to day that we don't talk about, but our next guest does. So I want to introduce her. She's been really patient listening to us doing our first episode spiel. So we now have our guest, Ashton Applewhite, who's a Brooklyn-based writer and activist and author of This Chair Rocks, a manifesto against ageism. Ashton, welcome to The Future is Old.
Thank you, Peter. Good to be here. Congratulations.
Thank you. Ashton, look, I have been following your work on ageism and language for as long as you've written the book and done your awesome TED Talk.
I was struck by the way you described your podcast mission when you invited me, which is that you'd like to move from a society that is youth obsessed to life obsessed.
That's right.
And I love that. And I think a key piece of this, which I will bring around to language, is that to live is to age, and to age is to live. We
That's
are
right.
aging from the minute we are born. And if so one of my many pet peeves is when we describe older people as aging parents, aging celebrities. Everyone is aging. It is not some sad thing that old people do just before they fall apart and die, right?
It's
And I
redundant,
think
isn't it?
it's redundant, and it equates aging with the second half of life, and even as Rach suggested in her comments, with this association, which is real but is problematic, of associating aging with disability and physical and cognitive decline. There are overlaps. You won't hear me saying, oh, none of that scary stuff is real. But to live is to age. It is the one universal human condition. And I think it's really important to think about not using aging as a substitute for older, and to think of it as a journey on which we all embark the day we are born. And
Speaking
corollary,
of
yes,
yeah,
go on.
no. Well, Ashton, you're talking about journeys. I am curious to learn a little bit about your journey, because you've approached this subject matter in a fantastically unacademic, very accessible way. Do you have roots in comedy?
No, I'm just very funny, but I'll on that. No, if you had told me, I'm a generalist. I came to this knowing nothing about aging, having no academic credits, no institutional affiliations. I just realized, like, oh, this was 20 years ago. I'm 73 now. This getting old thing, it's happening to me. And I don't even think that's ageism. I think it's human. I think it's really hard to imagine getting old. When you're a kid, you're like, why would you sit in a chair when you could run around, right? So
Yeah, no, that's fair.
I came at it with nothing but a layman's curiosity.
So, what I find fascinating is your language around aging and your language around age. Look, the Yo is Ageist summary or blog that you have is just fantastic. What have been some egregious examples that you can recall that people have submitted on your Yo is Ageist? Is this ageist
Oh my gosh.
blog?
They're all around us. I think I also really appreciate the way Rach called out the most egregious thing to me is the fact that it goes not the things people say necessarily, but the fact that it so often goes uncommented upon and normalized. But the idea of like warehousing old people because we are useless. Well, news alert, we live under capitalism, which reduces the value of human beings to how much money you make and whether you have paid employment. And that is another shocker. This is gendered, much that is to put no value on being a parent, no value on caring for other people, no value in all the volunteer things we do for free that fill our lives with meaning and help ease other people's lives, and so on. So, that's just one of the many appalling ideas that all too often go unchecked. And there is huge overlap with ableism, which is stigma and prejudice around how our minds and bodies function. And none of this stuff is okay. None of it, especially in a world of longer lives.
Now, can I say something really fast? I think this is so interesting what you bring up, Ashton, and you talked about capitalism and value. And I think even the term value, I think, is a loaded capitalist term, right? Because that implies money and worth. And so we look at kids and, I see, like, for example, when we're talking about ageism cutting both ways.
Yeah, those little things are useless.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like they have their parents' money, thank God. But it's like they were selling them Drunk Elephant is the one I've seen online where it's like aging cream or whatever for 8-year-olds. And it's like, well, they can afford it and you get them hooked so young on this concept that they shouldn't be aging. But it's like now we're putting this capitalist value on their ageist beliefs so that when they are older, it's like then we can toss them aside and stop worrying about them.
Teaching them to be afraid. because fear sells. No one makes money off self-acceptance. And that's a problem under capitalism.
Ashton, what are some other examples? We know the beauty industry is notorious for promoting anti-aging creams and teaching you to fear wrinkles. Where else do you see pernicious language? What other sectors?
Well, I think the place where age is the biggest problem for people is in the workplace, if I had to limit it, because no matter what system you live under, but I love getting the chance to say capitalism as often as possible. You have to put food on your table. And if you cannot, it is coded differently. You can't say, no, old people need not apply. And sometimes it's against younger people too, right? Not so often, but it's really hard for young people often to get a foothold or to get a promotion because they haven't suffered enough. They haven't paid their dues, or they don't have, employers assume they don't know enough. They don't have enough experience. And terms like digital native and asking for your year of birth or your, what generational label you associate with. Don't get me started on generational labels. They are not our friend. All those are ways of saying, which age bucket can we put you in? And just one thing about generational labels, marketers love them. And one reason they're crop up a lot in discourse around the workforce is because generational consulting is a really lucrative industry, even though there is buckets of evidence from the Harvard Business Review is the first source that comes to mind, showing that what workers of all ages have in common far exceeds their differences. HR people readily admit that older hires do just as well as younger hires, and they still don't want to hire us. And that is messed up. And I can show you, I can send you the studies.
I love that we're going to be talking about workforce in depth this season, and you're really previewing The Future is Old, all the episodes, Ashton, because language touches on all of this, and our framing of how we see ourselves, whether we're old or young, and the value we ascribe to being old or young is always hurting us. And I want to zoom in even further on, people cringe on words and word choice. So I think you have a point of view on this, but correct me if I'm wrong. Do you like the elderly or senior citizens or seniors or old people, or where do people get so hung up on words? I'm curious, what words do you get hung up on?
I mean, I think you should call people whatever they want to be called. Very few people would rather literally die than identify as old. And in a better world, old would not be a dirty word. It would just be a descriptor. I mean, I consider people in our 70s and 80s as old. I freely say I'm old, but it took me a long time to get there. Okay. And I don't expect people to meet me where they are unless they really want to. So ideally that would be destigmatized. I have solved, however, the what to call old people problem.
Oh my God.
Breaking news.
We have the solution.
I know, breaking news, episode 1. Because when I was writing my book, I literally got tired of typing older people or older Americans or older whatever. And I started to use older and younger as nouns. Olders and youngers. And I will tell you, if you start doing it now, people will, there's a tiny little, but no one doesn't understand what you mean.
Right.
And it is super helpful because a lot of people who don't want to identify as old for reasons I understand and respect will cop to being older. And also, a 4-year-old is older than her 2-year-old sister, and she will tell you that in no uncertain terms.
That's so true.
We age in relation to others. That's why there's no such thing as too old or too young, right? In some situations, we're olders. In other situations, we're youngers. And it's really a way to show that it is a spectrum and that we age in relation to others, and that how we relate to our age depends on context. It depends on whether, on where we happen to be, on what we're feeling like, and who we're hanging out with, right? And so to get past the binary.
Yeah, and I was hopeful that we'd get past some of this during COVID, 6 years ago, when older adults were disproportionately impacted initially by COVID. We in the field of aging were excited that our work was making headlines for all the wrong reasons, of course, but the fact that people were paying attention
Yeah.
to us as we age was really powerful. And then fast forward a few years, and we had presidential candidates battling it out over who was less old.
Right.
And we had media jumping in on the bandwagon. We had Hollywood effectively ostracize leaders for their age and their age alone, and as opposed to sort of auditioning for the job, right? As opposed to treating it like
Yeah.
a workplace function. So I'm wondering, Ashton, is there any hope in us reclaiming the word old?
I feel a lot of optimism. I actually think that there was, of course, all this incredibly ageist discourse around the last year of Biden's presidency. And I think that was a really good, it was horrible and ageist and
Yeah.
ableist, huge overlap with ableism. But I think it did a lot to bring age out of the dark corners and into the middle of the room, as did the pandemic in terrible ways. I mean, the human cost, the fact that more old people died is biology, not bias. But the fact that older people died in this number was all about bias. And of course, the fact that so many of them were people of color and were women is about the further, marginalization of those communities. It's hard to get old if you're a rich white guy. It's harder for everyone else. I see a lot of progress because when I started out, people didn't even know what ageism is. And that is really not the case anymore. And the first step in culture change, and when you said this podcast is about culture change, my heart sang. Because if we don't change the culture, we are not going to make the most of longer lives anywhere. And we are never going to make lasting change, right? So the first step in culture change is awareness. And the first step, it sounds hokey, but starts between our ears in looking at our own attitudes towards age and aging. Because as long as we're thinking about old people as other than ourselves, and Peter, you come out of aging services. I have been in a million rooms where people whose job it is to work with older people who they themselves clearly have more road behind them than ahead are still talking about the populations they work with as them, not us. And as long as we see older people as other than ourselves, we're doing the same thing that we do when we see another racial group or sexual orientation or fill in the blank as other than ourselves. There are real differences, but to other is to dehumanize and to accept lesser treatment as human beings.
You're absolutely right. And the aging services providers who work with some of the most underrepresented populations are doing them a disservice by reinforcing this ageism, despite their best attempts. And their sole job is to help older adults thrive. And yet we have such pernicious ageism in our culture that they can't even help themselves. They don't even realize they're doing it from everywhere, from basic things like the website that's promoting their work is loaded with patronizing and ageist imagery to how they describe their work. And it's not just the really important social workers of this country. I mean, you can zoom out to other sectors as well, like the financial services sector. When we at Next 50 were trying to, move our money into aging related causes, we were faced with blank stares. Like, what does that mean? Are you just going to be helping people in senior living? And I said, wait a minute. Is that all you're doing as you get older? You're only spending money on senior living? What about everything else? And so it really, really requires a narrative change. And that's what we're trying to do. We're starting with the narrative, the language, and just getting to every segment of society. Let's take it down to our average listener here. Ashton, what can they do to contribute to that systems change?
Well, I would suggest it starts with an ask that sounds really small. and is the hardest of all, arguably, which is really to think about how you use the words old and young, because they reflect how we think about getting older and how we think about younger people too. There is so much resentment, and when times are scary, and times right now are really scary, we hunker down and we look for scapegoats, and it does not open up our best selves, right? So there are a ton of younger people who are resenting the notion that older people have all the wealth and are more set in our ways and don't care about the world we leave behind. And there's a ton of resentment on the part of older people who do not like the thought that ageism affects young people too. They're like, no, it's worse for us, and we don't want to share that pie at all, right? And this is not helpful, right? We are human beings. We need to support each other through this really difficult journey called life, no matter where we are in it. It is really hard to be young, right? It's really easy to forget that when you get older, but that's, if I had to give one reason, mercifully I don't, for why it's so important to reach out to people of all ages and try and make them part of your social circle. It is so that older people can be reminded how hard it is to be young, and young people can see for themselves all the really fantastic things, along with the shit stuff, that accompany getting older.
You know, Ashton, I love that. I love that. And I want to thank you for your time, but you can't leave us yet, because we like to play a game here on The Future is Old. We're going to try it out. You're our guinea pig on this one. So, Rach, why don't you take it away? Rapid fire.
Okay, so we have these 3 rapid fire questions for you. And now I will say I'm like, oh my gosh, maybe I need to completely reword these after your last comment, but I still think that there is some good, I know, I'm like, I have so much to learn from Ashton. But I think you also brought it up with this one. So here's rapid fire questions. What don't you miss? What do you not miss about being younger?
Oh, or young, I was young once. Young is a thing. None of these are dirty words. I do not miss the endless self-doubt and self-criticizing voice in my head.
What is the gold in getting old?
The value in getting old is to know yourself better. And I think especially for women, late life is a time of real liberation.
God, it makes me so excited that I'm a woman. I love to hear that. Okay, and then this last one is, if you can finish this sentence, I'll know the future is old when...
Oh, sorry, my sort of pseudo-academic brain is kicking in. Like, is that an abstract question or a personal question? I'll know the future is old when old is no longer a word with any negative or positive connotations. I want an age-neutral world, right? Where age is not better or lesser than being young, and vice versa.
That's
great, right?
I love
that makes total sense.
Yeah. Like you said, it's just a word.
Yeah.
It's taking some of the power out of words, I think, is beautiful.
I mean, yeah, it's that we give age so much more power than it deserves in thinking it'll shape our politics or who we like. And affinity has so much more to do with where we grew up, with with gender, with class, with background, with priorities, with whether we like Taylor Swift, than how old we happen to be, right? And I would like to dial it down and have it be just one. It's real. Don't want to deny it, but give it way, 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 way less credit than it deserves in shaping our priorities and what we want to do with the rest of our lives, whether that's a weekend or a century.
Beautiful.
That's great. Ashton, thank you so much for joining us on our first episode of The Future is Old. If people wanted to find your work, where could they find you? What do you have coming up?
Well, I'm the only person, actually, I think there's a young person on LinkedIn now, but the only Ashton Applewhite, except maybe that person in the world. So my website is thischairrocks.com, where you can find links to my TED Talk, links to Yo, Is This Ageist, links to the blog where I've been thinking out loud for free for over 20 years, searchable by topic. And I'm on social media and all the places. Usually is This Chair Rocks. You can find all that stuff here or there. I try hard to make my work available to the public for free through all those ways. My book is not free, but it is a really good book. And it is available for sale. Google Ashton plus ageism. You can find me.
Thank you, Ashton. Thanks so much for joining us.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I have to tell you, I love Ashton because it was such a refreshing take on this work. And it was a voice that came from a space that wasn't the traditional spaces of aging. So for me, Ashton is really someone who's just challenged the status quo on aging. So what are some things you learned from her?
Well, it's so interesting. As I said, I care so much about aging as a woman. And I think, she talks so much about losing that self-doubt and losing that fear and worry, and how as you get older as a woman, that just starts to go away. And I hear from every woman in their 70s that it's so liberating to be in your 70s. And it just makes me, I am 40 years away from that, but I'm just like, God, what a beautiful thing to look forward to. So that really stuck out to me. And one thing that I really liked that she talked about was, she said, if we don't change the culture, we won't be able to make the most of these longer lives, right? It's like we are living longer because of medicine and health and, some, in my opinion, longevity kooks. But it's like, those people aren't fighting ageism, right? They just want to live for a very long time because they're so scared to die. But it's like, well, they have to then challenge their own ageism in order to make the most of those longer lives.
Yeah, and I think finally for me was reminding us just how much power we've ascribed to aging.
Yes.
So for example, that goes everywhere from all the little self-doubts or that you can't do something because of your age,
Right.
to something as silly as Spotify's end of year summary.
Right, exactly.
And what you listen to, as if because you listen to a lot of Taylor Swift, all of a sudden you're 21 years old.
Yeah, exactly.
It's such a silly way to use age and to power age.
Yes.
I really liked how we need to challenge that.
Yeah, and when she just talked about the younger versus older was so interesting, because it's true. You talk to a 4-year-old, they are a big girl.
Yeah.
She's a big girl. She's bigger than her
Yeah,
2-year-old
that's right.
baby sister,
That's
right?
right.
And so it's like, she said something about how we age in relation to others. And I was like, right. It's not a negative thing. It is in relation to others, and we can just neutralize the term.
Well, I have to tell you, if this is going to be how the rest of the season is going to go, I am so excited.
Me too.
I mean, just challenging things that people don't want to talk about is always fun.
Yes.
But to do it around aging, both young and old, to have all these amazing guests we're going to have is going to be terrific.
I know, I'm psyched.
And so I just want to thank you for joining me as co-host.
Thank you.
I think you got the gig. I think you're going to be on for a while. Yeah,
Thank you.
I think so.
No ageism in play here.
No ageism in play at all. And I want to thank everyone else for listening to our first episode of The Future is Old, where we want to create a world that's more life obsessed and less youth obsessed.
Love it. Thank you, Peter.
Thank you.
And thank you, Ashton.